and just think about getting motivated and getting that belief system up and going in you that yes, if you make changes and you haven't tipped that scale all the way into Alzheimer's, you can change the trajectory of your brain health. Okay, so I hear so many times people say, oh my gosh, my brain is already going. I cannot find my car keys. I can't remember her name. I can't remember this. I can't remember that. It happens to all of us. And it may be that you weren't paying attention, but it's more than likely not an indicator of your brain health. When you should be worried is if you're holding your car keys and you say, what are these for? That's when you have a little bit of questioning to do. But if you're not at that stage, we're in a good realm here to make a difference, okay? So if you don't remember what to do with your car keys, we want to talk further, or someone else. But if you forget names, forget where your car keys are, all of those things, you're absolutely in great shape, okay? I know. Don't leave. Okay. So the gentleman up here, this was 1901, and he gets the patient on the right, and she comes and she is not able to remember if she'd had a car in 1901. She wouldn't be able to remember what her keys did. She's not able to remember anything. She's disorganized. She is lost. She's confused. And he did everything he could do, but could not find a way to treat her. He made her comfortable till the end of her life. And when she died, he dissected her brain, and in that dissection of her brain found lots of plaque and tangles, what we know as Alzheimer's now. In fact, he's Dr. Alzheimer's, and she was the first patient in 1901 to have that diagnosis, to have that found in the autopsy. That was 114 years ago. And all we have learned about Alzheimer's since then for treatment and for cure is that that's not normal aging. That is not normal. That is not what we all have to sign up for. But in 114 years of this being our problem, we also haven't made very many medical advances. We don't have a pill that will prevent you from getting Alzheimer's, and we don't have a pill or medication that will treat it. We have not come that far in 114 years. But it's not depressing. In that 114 years, and in the last 10 years, we have learned a lot about what we can do to prevent it, and that it doesn't come from a pill or something like that. It comes from what we do day in, day out. So I love this slide. In the dark blue is when you're looking at the risk for brain aging. The dark blue is genetics, and the lighter blue is lifestyle choices. The main defense you have on brain aging and Alzheimer's is lifestyle choices. And they're finding that that's the biggest cause. And that if you can still know what your car keys do, you can still work towards making some type of an impact. Is everybody in questions? Okay. So now we're going to get into the technology side of my brain and see how much I recalled from what Forrest just told me. Because I want to show a quick video. Wait, the The mouse isn't showing up on here. Well, it's not showing on my computer. Maybe if I escape it. There we go.
Thing as a perfect writer. This is why I use Grammarly to check my work.
If I'm putting commas in the wrong places, that can shift my credibility.
How many people here would like to live to be at least 80 years old? Yeah. I think we all have this hopeful expectation of living into old age.
I forgot to say the
Let's
joke about
project out
that.
into the future, to your future yous, and let's imagine that we're all 85. Now, everyone look at two people.
Oh, I took the lights the wrong way.
One of you probably has Alzheimer's disease. All right. And maybe you're thinking, well, it won't be me. Then, okay, you are a caregiver. So, in some way, this terrifying disease is likely to affect us all. Part of the fear around Alzheimer's stems from the sense that there's nothing we can do about it. Despite decades of research, we still have no disease-modifying treatment and no cure. So if we're lucky enough to live long enough, Alzheimer's appears to be our brain's destiny. But maybe it doesn't have to be. What if I told you we could change these statistics, literally change our brain's destiny without relying on a cure or advancements in medicine? Let's begin by looking at what we currently understand about the neuroscience of Alzheimer's. Here's a picture of two neurons connecting. The point of connection, this space circled in red, is called a synapse. The synapse is where neurotransmitters are released. This is where signals are transmitted, where communication happens. This is where we think, feel, see, hear, desire, and remember. And the synapse is where Alzheimer's happens. Let's zoom in on the synapse and look at a cartoon representation of what's going on. During the business of communicating information, in addition to releasing neurotransmitters like glutamate into the synapse, neurons also release a small peptide called amyloid beta. Normally, amyloid beta is cleared away and metabolized by microglia, the janitor cells of our brains. While the molecular causes of Alzheimer's are still debated, most neuroscientists believe that the disease begins when amyloid beta begins to accumulate. Too much is released or not enough is cleared away, and the synapse begins to pile up with amyloid beta. And when this happens, it binds to itself, forming sticky aggregates called amyloid plaques. How many people here are 40 years old or older? You're afraid to admit it now. This initial step into the disease, this presence of amyloid plaques accumulating, can already be found in your brains. Now, the only way we could be sure of this would be through a PET scan, because at this point, you are blissfully unaware. You're not showing any impairments in memory, language, or cognition yet. We think it takes at least 15 to 20 years of amyloid plaque accumulation before it reaches a tipping point, then triggering a molecular cascade that causes the clinical symptoms of the disease. Prior to the tipping point, your lapses in memory might include things like, why did I come in this room? Or, oh, what's his name? Or, where did I put my keys? Yeah, now before you all start freaking out again, because I know half of you did at least one of those in the last 24 hours, these are all normal kinds of forgetting. In fact, I would argue that these examples might not even involve your memory because you didn't pay attention to where you put your keys in the first place. After the tipping point, the glitches in memory, language, and cognition are different. Instead of eventually finding your keys in your coat pocket or on the table by the door, you find them in the refrigerator. Or you find them and you think, what are these for? Okay, so what happens when amyloid plaques accumulate to this tipping point? our microglia janitor cells become hyperactivated, releasing chemicals that cause inflammation and cellular damage. We think they might actually start clearing away the synapses themselves. A crucial neural transport protein called tau becomes hyperphosphorylated and twists itself into something called tangles, which choke off the neurons from the inside. By mid-stage Alzheimer's, we have massive inflammation and tangles, and all-out war at the synapse and cell death. So if you were a scientist trying to cure this disease, at what point would you ideally want to intervene? Many scientists are betting big on the simplest solution: keep amyloid plaques from reaching that tipping point, which means that drug discovery is largely focused on developing a compound that will prevent, eliminate, or reduce amyloid plaque accumulation. And so the cure for Alzheimer's will likely be a preventative medicine. We're going to have to take this pill before we reach that tipping point, before the cascade is triggered, before we start leaving our keys in the refrigerator. We think this is why, to date, these kinds of drugs have failed in clinical trials, not because the science wasn't sound, but because the people in these trials were already symptomatic. It was too late. Think of amyloid plaques as a lit match. At the tipping point, the match sets fire to the forest. Once the forest is ablaze, it doesn't do any good to blow out the match. You have to blow out the match before the forest catches fire. Even before scientists sort this out, this information is actually really good news for us, because it turns out that the way we live can influence the accumulation of amyloid plaques. And so there are things we can do to keep us from reaching that tipping point. Let's picture your risk of Alzheimer's as a seesaw scale. We're going to pile risk factors on one arm, and when that arm hits the floor, you are symptomatic and diagnosed with Alzheimer's. Let's imagine you're 50 years old. You're not a spring chicken anymore, so you've accumulated some amyloid plaques with age. Your scale is tipped a little bit. Now let's look at your DNA. We've all inherited our genes from our moms and our dads. Some of these genes will increase our risk and some will decrease it. If you're like Alice and still Alice, you've inherited a rare genetic mutation that cranks out amyloid beta, and this alone will tip your scale arm to the ground. But for most of us, the genes we inherit will only tip the arm a bit. For example, ApoE4 is a gene variant that increases amyloid, but you can inherit a copy of ApoE4 from mom and dad and still never get Alzheimer's, which means that for most of us, our DNA alone does not determine whether we get Alzheimer's. So what does? We can't do anything about getting older or the genes we've inherited. So far, we haven't changed our brain's destiny. What about sleep? In slow-wave deep sleep, our glial cells rinse cerebral spinal fluid throughout our brains, clearing away metabolic waste that accumulated in our synapses while we were awake. Deep sleep is like a power cleanse for the brain. But what happens if you shortchange yourself on sleep? Many scientists believe that poor sleep hygiene might actually be a predictor of Alzheimer's. A single night of sleep deprivation leads to an increase in amyloid beta. And amyloid accumulation has been shown to disrupt sleep, which in turn causes more amyloid to accumulate. And so now we have this positive feedback loop that's going to accelerate the tipping of that scale. What else? Cardiovascular health. High blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, smoking, high cholesterol have all been shown to increase our risk of developing Alzheimer's. Some autopsy studies have shown that as many as 80% of people with Alzheimer's also had cardiovascular disease. Aerobic exercise has been shown in many studies to decrease amyloid beta in animal models of the disease. So, a heart-healthy Mediterranean lifestyle and diet can help to counter the tipping of this scale. Okay, so there are many things we can do to prevent or delay the onset of Alzheimer's, but let's say you haven't done any of them. Let's say you're 65.
Or
There's
85.
Alzheimer's in your family, so you've likely inherited a gene or two that tips your scale arm a bit. You've been burning the candle at both ends for years. You love bacon, and you don't run unless someone's chasing you. Let's imagine that your amyloid plaques have reached that tipping point. Your scale arm has crashed to the floor. You've tripped the cascade, setting fire to the forest, causing inflammation, tangles, and cell death. You should be symptomatic for Alzheimer's. You should be having trouble finding words and keys and remembering what I said at the beginning of this talk. But you might not be. There's one more thing you can do to protect yourself from experiencing the symptoms of Alzheimer's, even if you have the full-blown disease pathology ablaze in your brain. It has to do with neuroplasticity and cognitive reserve. Remember, the experience of having Alzheimer's is ultimately a result of losing synapses. The average brain has over 100 trillion synapses, which is fantastic. We've got a lot to work with. And this isn't a static number. We gain and lose synapses all the time through a process called neuroplasticity. Every time we learn something new, we are creating and strengthening new neural connections, new synapses. In the nun study, 678 nuns, all over the age of 75 when the study began, were followed for more than 2 decades. They were regularly given physical checkups and cognitive tests, and when they died, their brains were all donated for autopsy. In some of these brains, scientists discovered something surprising. Despite the presence of plaques and tangles and brain shrinkage, what appeared to be unquestionable Alzheimer's, the nuns who had belonged to these brains showed no signs of having the disease while they were alive. How can this be? We think it's because these nuns had a high level of cognitive reserve, which is a way of saying that they had more functional synapses. People who have more years of formal education, who have a high degree of literacy, who engage regularly in mentally stimulating activities, all have more cognitive reserve. They have an abundance and a redundancy in neural connections. So even if they have a disease like Alzheimer's compromising some of their synapses, they've got many extra backup connections, and this buffers them from noticing that anything is amiss. Let's imagine a simplified example. Let's say you only know one thing about a subject. Let's say it's about me. You know that Lisa Genova wrote Still Alice, and that's the only thing you know about me. You have that single neural connection, that one synapse. Now imagine you have Alzheimer's. You have plaques and tangles and inflammation and microglia devouring that synapse. Now when someone asks you, hey, who wrote Still Alice? You can't remember because that synapse is either failing or gone. You've forgotten me forever. But what if you had learned more about me? Let's say you learned 4 things about me. Now imagine you have Alzheimer's and 3 of those synapses are damaged or destroyed. You still have a way to detour the wreckage. You can still remember my name. So we can be resilient to the presence of Alzheimer's pathology through the recruitment of yet undamaged pathways. And we create these pathways, this cognitive reserve, by learning new things. Now, ideally, we want these new things to be as rich in meaning as possible, recruiting sight and sound and associations and emotion. So this really doesn't mean doing crossword puzzles. You don't want to simply retrieve information you've already learned, because this is like traveling down old familiar streets, cruising neighborhoods you already know. You want to pave new neural roads. Building an Alzheimer's resistant brain means learning to speak Italian, meeting new friends, reading a book, or listening to a great TED Talk. And if despite all of this, you are someday diagnosed with Alzheimer's, there are 3 lessons I've learned from my grandmother and the dozens of people I've come to know living with this disease. Diagnosis doesn't mean you're dying tomorrow. Keep living. You won't lose your emotional memory. You'll still be able to understand love and joy. You might not remember what I said 5 minutes ago, but you'll remember how I made you feel. And you are more than what you can remember. Thank you.
What'd you think? Did you like it? I figured there was no way I could top that. I'm going to get the lights back on. Hold on. So I hope that she does a little bit of that. You can fight Alzheimer's. Even if you have it, there are different ways to set up your brain and different ways to look at it. And she mentioned a nun study. I don't know if some of you were at the talk I did a long time ago where we had the videos of the nuns. Because the study is really it's just incredible. Because when they were autopsied, they had all the plaques and tangles. But some of the things that they showed in the video that she didn't discuss were that these nuns spent a lot of time, they were very active, they were exercising, and they also spent a lot of time in prayer. And they feel like these things also helped. And so what I want to do, I have one more slide. I kind of changed the order because I redid it today. So this is a slide of what they used to think is the natural decline in brain health. On the left is the healthy 25-year-old, and on the right, an 80-year-old with cognitive losses. Can you see the difference between the two? Okay, so you can see a lot more black. If you're looking on the right side, you can see a lot more black. It's shrunk. If you just start to look left to right, you can see a lot more black, a lot more shrinking. The loss of the hippocampus, which we're going to go into in a little bit about how important that is for storing memory. That's where your memory is done. But what they have started to find as we've gotten more technology, because right now we have new ways of looking at the brain with PET scans and MRIs, and we're finding so much more. What they're finding right now is that actually what we used to think was the normal aged 80 brain is not at all. That lifestyle can really change, and that if you're doing a lot of the things, your brain at any age can still look like the one on the left. And that as you make changes, the brain starts to change. That if yours is looking a little bit more like the one on the right, and you make some big changes, you can actually start to change the way that that brain looks on the scans. And that's the absolute exciting part about where our technology is and why we're able to find out all of this stuff that we didn't know 10 years ago. So she did bring up two important, really important parts. And she brought up the neuroplasticity. It's the brain's ability to reorganize itself by making new neural connections. There is another researcher. She has her PhD. Her name is Sarah Lazar. And she has been doing a lot of research on meditation in the brain. And we're going to go through that in a little bit. But she asked the question, what makes your brain change? And so she did an MRI scan of about, I think it was 50 people, took a baseline read, and then taught them all to juggle and asked them to all practice juggling every single day for 3 months. I'm glad I wasn't in that study. Anyway, and then they put them back into the MRI scan and noticed that there was a huge change in the brain where your motor function happens, where movement happens. That the act of learning something new and doing it for a while showed up on the brain scan. That's what we're finding on any new experience, anything new you learn, anything new you do, it's represented on a brain scan. So this was the way they did it. They did the baseline 3 months, and then 3 months later, so it ended up at 6 months, and saw a definite difference in the jugglers' brains. But think about that. That is the way our brain works on anything new that we learn or do. You're making a change, and that change can be seen on your scan. The other term that she brought up was cognitive reserve. Cognitive reserve is your brain's way of preventing damage or harm. It finds alternate ways of getting a job done. I like to think of the stories that I've heard of people who lose their sight late in life. And then their hearing goes up. And they can hear so much better. Do you know kind of a familiar part to this? Have you heard these stories? That is cognitive reserve. The brain is very efficient. It says, we're no longer using the parts for vision anymore. Let's take that over with hearing. And so the brain remapped, redid itself to help accommodate the new challenge of loss of eyesight. And that's another thing that our brain does. But our brain needs certain things to happen to make these changes for neuroplasticity and the cognitive reserve. And that's what I want to go into, and we'll be offering all of these things in class. I think, okay, so I was really rushing to redo my slides because it didn't work all the way through. So this next one is a handout. Does everybody have it? Ah, you will. Oh, wait. Can some people share? And I promise to get you some. Can you share? And can you all share? And I will. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I promise I'll get them passed out. Also, you've had this in your box before, and you will see it again. Okay. So, what the research has found is that when you are doing brain games, Mediterranean diet or dietary changes, cardiovascular exercise, learning something new, or mindfulness type meditation, these are the things that you need to be doing to change your brain. And I'm going to go into the research on each one of these a little bit more. So with wanting to make sure that in 2 years you've changed your brain test, if you did that a couple of weeks ago, you'll notice that with every piece that has been found to help your brain, we're now offering a class in that. So that being here or even on Carriage Club, you can come and be a part of something every single day that will utilize and change your brain. So for brain games, we have Brain Teasers, Bridge, Ping Pong. The dining service is going to be getting online, and they're going to be putting a blue dot by everything on the line that's Mediterranean so that you know you're following that. We're going to be doing the cardiovascular exercise. Learning something new, we added sign language class. Because remember, she said it's about learning something new, but it can't be a crossword puzzle. Sign language. Sign language has one other way. If you are saying it and feeling it and moving, you're getting more parts of your brain to be active to learn, just as she was talking about in the cognitive reserve. And then for mindfulness, we're going to have yoga, tai chi, and a meditation class that starts on Tuesday and I hope lasts a long time. So this is kind of your chart of what's, and so as I go through the next parts of the research, I want you to look and think, what of these could I add today that I have not done? Can I add learning something new, mindfulness, exercise? And hopefully I'll show you enough about how it changes and improves your brain where you'll want to make that change. And so, hold on, I'm going to give this. There you go. I knew you didn't have one. Okay, so let me start telling you about some of the research on some of the things that you can do. The first one is sleep, and you're wondering, well, how can I have an impact on that? In May, I'm going to talk on Tai Chi for sleep. It's some of the techniques you can do to relax right before bed. to help with sleep, and I'll be doing that as a talk as soon as I get back. But I thought I could tell you a little bit right now because sleep is so, so important. What they find is that throughout our whole body, we're able to get rid of the waste products that happen through our lymph system. It's a passive circulatory system. But researchers have always been kind of wondering, well, how does the brain clear out toxic waste? We don't have a lymph system or anything like that in our brain. What they found in doing PET scans while people are sleeping is that when you go to sleep, the circulatory system goes down and another circulatory system comes up, and it's cerebral spinal fluid, and it comes through and it washes your brain. It's like scrubbing your brain of the amyloid plaque and everything. It's amazing what they have found, and this has been in the last 5 years, about how sleep cleans your brain. And so if you miss a night's sleep, it's like having dinner or 3 meals at your house and deciding not to do your dishes, just leaving them at your sink. That's the amyloid plaque that gets built up in your brain when you miss a night's sleep. So before I go any further, if you think, oh my gosh, I don't sleep, that needs to be your one goal because so much of that importance. They also did some really interesting rat studies, and they were following what happened in the rat's brain through a day. And they would put the rat in a really hard maze, and they would watch that rat go through and learn that maze. Then at night, they were tracking what that brain did as it was learning that new maze. At sleep, they would find that the rat's brain did the same patterning in its sleep, like it was trying to reinforce those memories. So when you sleep, your brain is working on storing deeper those memories and cleaning house. So it's so important if you're worried about memory. And so, if you think, oh, I don't sleep, I know someone that doesn't sleep, that is your job to next thing start figuring out, well, why don't I sleep? 3 good tips for that. Make sure your room's cool enough. We naturally drop a couple of degrees when we sleep. And then back when we were hunter and gatherers, it would get cooler every night. We're used to that. So one big trick is make your house cooler a half hour before you want to go to bed. This one I have found to just be a lifesaver for me, making sure that there's no light in your room. Over Christmas, I stayed at a hotel in Dallas, and my uncle was paying, so it's quite a bit nicer than I would normally stay in, and they were doing this boutique thing about absolute darkness in your hotel room. And so when I turned out the light, there was not one, like I even was like, I can't even see my hand. And I noticed I slept so much better. It matched that research. Not even if you have that little blue light from your alarm clock, that can make a difference. And your computer, all of that. Turn those things off. Now that we have cell phones, a great thing you can do is set your alarm on your cell phone and not have your alarm clock with that light. One thing I really liked, and if anybody's interested, I'll try and track it down for you. In the hotel, next to you, there was a lamp, and the whole thing, it was like this big a space. If you touched it, it lit up. So you weren't trying to search for a light. You touched it once and it was just a little glow. You touched it again and it was a big light, so that you didn't have to worry about, if you had to get up and go to the restroom, being wide awake because you had to turn on all the lights. So there's things that you can do if you think that that might be helpful for you, and I'm happy to help you with that. Okay, this one, we're going to switch to exercise now. I used to, when I was first interested in exercise, think, oh, I want to exercise because I want to look better. Now, That's not why I exercise, not at all. That was a 30 years ago goal. It's because I know that it has such a powerful influence on my brain. The research on studying and memory on brain is incredible. It's so powerful that I make my son wake up 20 minutes earlier and run the block before he goes to school so that his brain is primed and ready for learning. He's 10 and it's not an easy task, but I'm so sold on the benefits and I'm sold on it for you too. So let me tell you why it's so beneficial. Exercise is the only thing that you get an immediate positive outcome from. It, when you exercise, releases dopamine, which is your alertness. It gives you motivation, working memory. Then there's norepinephrine, which is your concentration. Your serotonin, which gives you satisfaction. All three of those come up when you exercise. One interesting thing is as you're starting to go into Alzheimer's, they've found that people start to go lower in dopamine, your alertness, and it kind of is a feel-good chemical too. Exercise helps that pre-Alzheimer's brain come back up with dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. So that's an immediate effect that you get that lasts for several hours after you exercise. And I'm sure you can feel it right after. I know that I can be having the worst day, spend 15 minutes exercising, and my whole mood's changed. Oh, and if you don't do it too late, if you exercise within 2 hours of wanting to go to sleep, it could sabotage you. But if you do it early and you have enough time to come down from that exercise, it does help with insomnia. So if your goal is sleep, exercise could be an avenue towards that. That also helps with a lot of other things for your brain. So they have done so many studies on exercise and your brain, and several I have talked about, so I was trying to find some new ones. First, walking reduces dementia risk. This was 2,257 retired men aged 71 to 93 and found that those who walked less than a quarter mile a day were almost twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's or other forms of dementia as men who walked more than 2 miles a day. What they keep finding in study after study is that the more exercise you get, or the more regular you are with exercise, the more your brain health risk goes down. This one comes from the University of Illinois. If you look at the left, that's your brain after sitting quietly, and then after a 20-minute walk. Can you see the difference in the brain? How it just lights it up. It just gets it going. So one of my favorite authors who wrote the book Spark, his name's John Ratey, R-A-T-E-Y. He also has a great Google talk. If you don't want to get the book, you can learn his stuff in about a half hour. And he is convinced about the brain and exercise. And he's done several studies about it. My favorite is that he thought, okay, I want to see what happens when children just have the change of exercise. So he went into Naperville, Chicago. He recruited one of their schools there, and they were really low test scores at the school. They only made one change. They made the students at the school do cardiovascular exercise with a fairly good intensity for 20 minutes a day. And that school is ranked #1 in several of the tests. They were astounded by it. The research was great, making the point that the exercise will change the way that you learn and remember. Well, if you're worried about your memory, this is one way to really have an impact. It also has been found because exercise, so everything I've talked to you so far is the short-term effect. Every time you exercise, norepinephrine, serotonin, dopamine come up. But then, after you've been exercising for a while, you start to see changes in the brain that are permanent. And different things happen. Anytime you're improving your cardiovascular or your vascular health, you're also improving your brain. And exercise has been found to be really helpful for that. But then one thing is that exercise, when you do it, releases a neurochemical called BDNF. How many of y'all are familiar with BDNF? BDNF is a wonderful thing. You want to think of it like Miracle-Gro for your brain. It does the exact same thing as Miracle-Gro. And when you exercise, you release BDNF. Exercise, BDNF, Miracle-Gro. What that helps is help increase neurogenesis, or creating more of those neurons, and preventing neurogenesis death. You're going to increase the synapses in your nerves and numbers of function and increase your vascular health. What they found is that when you're exercising, you definitely have a better brain, increased network connectivity, and larger cognitive reserve. And remember from Lisa Genova's talk, cognitive reserve was one of the big things for helping you overcome some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's as you're hitting that tipping point. Any questions so far? Everybody's looking serious. This is still interesting. I always like to look at your brain. It's like a bicep muscle. The more you exercise it, the bigger it gets. In fact, on the scans that we've been talking about, someone that's been exercising for a long time actually has a larger hippocampus and prefrontal cortex. Your hippocampus, that's memory. That's where memory happens. And direction. You're being able to navigate. And what they see is with Alzheimer's, sometimes it's the hippocampus that gets hurt first, and memory starts to go, and your sense of direction. And that's hippocampus. So exercise, when you look at a scan, increases that size. Prefrontal cortex, I like to think of it as the CEO of your brain. That's where executive function happens. And that's also been found to enlarge with exercise. Okay, I want to switch gears. We're going to be doing a big thing for the Mediterranean diet. And we have our dining service on track with that. And so I want to get you some of the research that we're finding on diet and the brain. I put her name up. I've ordered her book, and I'll tell you more about it. But she is not the only researcher to come up with this research. But there is a Dr. Lisa Mosconi. And I'm loving the research that she's putting out right now because she has a PhD in both nutrition and she's a neuroscientist. So she studies the brain. She has 2 PhDs. And what she's very interested in is the Mediterranean diet. In fact, she's Italian, and she's really producing a lot of very good research. And she's doing a lot of brain scans. So then, looking at this next scan, this was a study done. On the left is a lady who is 52 who has been on the Mediterranean diet most of her life. And on the right is another lady that's been on the standard American diet. Can you see the differences? When you see more dark on the right and it's shrunk on the left, see the ventricles where they're pointed? The butterfly-shaped fissures in the middle of the brain are small and compact. Can you see those differences? These match a lot of the studies that are coming out. But when they start to look at people who are eating a more Mediterranean diet, they're seeing definite changes in the brain. Another thing that they're seeing is that it can actually change the brain when you switch to that diet, and it has a huge preventative benefit when you get on it. So if you are starting to have some problems and you get on it, you're going to see that it helps fix some things. If you're having no problems and you're eating that diet, you have a huge preventative program going on. So with the Mediterranean diet, a lot of people say, well, how do I do the Mediterranean diet? The Mediterranean diet, to me, is best summed up. If your great-great-grandmother would recognize it, it's more than likely on the Mediterranean diet. It's not having to eat hummus and feta. It's more about the types of food you're eating. And if you're eating anything processed or pre-prepared, that's usually where the problem is, that you're seeing some of the unhealthy parts for the brain. So looking at it, you want to have as many fruits, vegetables, and grains, whole grains, down at the bottom. Also olive oil, beans, nuts, seeds, and spices. But then you want to also have your meat and your protein coming from fish and seafood most often. And then a little bit less of the poultry, eggs, cheese, and yogurt. And at the very top, your red meats and sweets. Wine in moderation, and drinking water. So it's really a whole foods, well-balanced diet with a lot more seafood for your protein consumption. And I'm going to go into that here in just a minute. So some of this research you can find in this book, Brain Food. It's the surprising science of eating for cognitive health. And she's just doing some fantastic research. Okay, so one thing, they eat more seafood in the Mediterranean. And this is what they found, is that you're getting 4 grams of DHA daily. You get a 70% lower risk of dementia. The omega-3s that contain DHA come from seafood, salmon, mackerel, cod, herring, tuna. Dr. Mosconi, recommends caviar. She says that caviar has the exact makeup that our brain has. So I thought maybe we should all write a note and get caviar. Not really. But really any of the omega-3s. If you're wanting more of a vegetarian type diet, you can get DHA from flax seeds or chia seeds, but it takes 3 times as much because it's not as absorbable. When you eat seafood, you get automatic DHA. When you get the vegetarian source, it comes in an ALA form, not the DHA form, and you have to convert it. So you have to eat more omega-3s if you're going to do vegetarian. With getting the omega-3s, you can do supplements, but there have been several studies that have found that your foods contain things that we haven't found to put in your supplements yet. When they do the studies on omega-3s from a supplement is active in your body for 3 days. Or when you eat omega-3s, salmon, mackerel, cod, herring, tuna, that omega-3 is active in your body for 3 days. When you take the supplement, it's only effective for that day. So the supplement isn't nearly as powerful as getting the food. So it's great to use the supplement to make sure you're getting it because that nutrient's so necessary, but also eat the food. Any questions so far? Huh? They're supposed to be starting in the next week or 2. Yes. You know what, I won't identify those because that was just a picture just to keep, but I will tell you what the fatty foods are. Okay, so to get that, you want your salmon, mackerel, cod, herring, tuna, sardines, caviar are going to be great sources. Vegetarian, good sources. And if you buy an egg that's been pasture raised, they found but it has to be pasture raised. It can't be just a regular egg. You can get it from there too. Also, your vegetarian sources, garbanzo beans, chia seeds, flax seeds. There's a picture of spinach up there, but I've never known it to have spinach. But I was just quickly grabbing an image because I was trying to make my slide work.
Well, the Mediterranean diet has been also recommended for people with high cholesterol.
Yes.
What is the connection of cholesterol and brain function?
Okay, cholesterol and brain function, what the research is saying, anything that's good for your heart is good for your brain. The connections all kind of run the same, but I think it's about the omega-3s, because omega-3s in your diet can help, and the high fiber and things like that that really help with the cholesterol. And I mean, there's so many nutrient parts to it. Those probably are low. They're not the ones, I've studied them for a long time, they're not the ones that I generally have heard being really a good amount. I could just cheat off this one real quick to just do that image. So I did a quick image search for it. Yes? That's true about the vitamins. And that would probably be a whole nother talk. The question was studies about, and that was my whole career early on, so I can easily do that talk, but quickly, most of us are low in vitamin D, but you want to be a little bit cautious about some vitamins, and so that whole can of worms is probably a whole hour. I'll put it on the lecture list. How about that? Would anybody else be interested in that? A talk on vitamins? Okay. So make sure you're getting your omega-3s DHA. Okay, so one thing that I don't always talk about that she has really found in her research is the importance of hydration. That really staying hydrated has a huge impact on your brain. And that people who live in the Mediterranean are not as dehydrated as we are here. The Mediterranean, they don't drink as much coffee, which is a natural diuretic, and they drink wine, but in moderation. And they're not drinking as many or any of the sodas. So we have a lot of diuretics and not a lot of water. So you really want to be getting your water in. Our brain is 73% water, and it only takes 2% dehydration to affect your attention, memory, and cognitive skills. That's not very much. Uh-huh.
They told me to stop drinking as much water.
Oh, wow.
I'm only allowed 2 bottles, but I was drinking way too much.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance. The little interesting trick that I've always learned, and about if you're hydrated or not, I can teach you real quick. And she actually brought up this. I listened to hours of her lectures, and I thought, oh, well, okay, this is good and confirming. So you might not be able to see it, but you can do it with your own hand if not, but my veins are huge. So right now, my vein is really prominent. And I can see it just really big. As I bring my vein up, when it starts to flatten, because your veins can show how hydrated you are, you should be able to maintain your vein at without it going flat on you all the way up to about your nose.
You're saying the vein should stay high.
Should stay high, all the way up. And if not, you need to leave here and have water when we're done. And I noticed I do too, so. She also, okay, so you want to think of how you can, oh.
We were asking about how many bottles?
About 8. 8 glasses still is pretty well true, yeah. But But really, this is a better way to look at it. If you add one more glass than you have had today, you're making up that difference. And so if you never drink water, and I tell you drink 8 glasses, it's all about doability and consistency. If you drink 8 glasses for the next week and then think, that's too hard, I'm not going to do that anymore, we've gotten nowhere. But if you add 1 glass every time you wake up, first thing in the morning, and you do that for the next couple of years, you've taken 1 step closer to being less dehydrated. So why don't everybody think, when is the time I could add 1 more glass of water and that would be doable? For me, after I went through this research, I thought, I'm going to have 1 more glass of water because I don't drink usually till I've been here a couple of hours. So my goal was, I'm going to wake up and have a full glass of water first thing every morning. And that's just 1 more glass, but that's 1 more glass that takes me away from being dehydrated. So set a very small, easy, attainable, long-term goal. It's a balance act. You were diluted. Yeah, it was. Yeah, yeah, and that does happen if you're drinking a lot. Yes. Yeah, because it's a diuretic. Yeah, because of the caffeine. Yeah. So if you have a cup of tea, have a glass of water. Warm water is faster to absorb. And so if you're really feeling like, oh, I'm feeling like my memory's not as good, I'm feeling a little fuzzy, I may be dehydrated, drink a warmer water, and you're going to fix that problem faster. And I've noticed that to be true on some of the athletic things I do. Any more questions? Oh, okay, so I almost forgot the next part. Okay, so when you think your brain is like a gate, we have the blood-brain barrier. It only lets certain things in, but it needs definite things for fuel. Glucose, good fats, the omega-3s, antioxidants. Our brain creates more waste, more free radicals, because there's so much going on in our brains that you really need to be getting the antioxidants in for brain health. So blueberries are notoriously one of the best things for brain health because of the anthocyanins in them, if I said that right. And but now some of the research is that the blackberries might be winning the race. But your great antioxidant sources are going to be your berries. Green tea has a little bit more than the normal black tea. Green tea, black tea, your fruits. Anything like that's going to be giving you the antioxidants. So make sure you're getting plenty of antioxidants in. That's where all the fruits and vegetables come in, as some of the delivery systems for the antioxidants. Any more questions on the nutrition side? Yes. I bet grapefruit does. I haven't thought about it, but it would have your vitamin C, which is kind of which is an antioxidant. But be careful with, oh, yeah. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Watch it with your medication. Make sure and ask your pharmacist, because grapefruit's like on the do not have with a lot of medications for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like this diet green tea, that you buy 6-pack of or whatever. Is that okay for you?
I haven't looked at that. But I do know that we have green tea and green tea with lemon and jasmine green tea all in our dining. So after, well, not after dinner if you're trying to fight sleep, but for your lunch, get a glass of green tea and get those antioxidants going. And get the berries when they're there. Yeah. There's so much on nutrition. Okay, so we're going to switch gears into meditation. For me personally, meditation has been one of the more powerful things that I have done. I started out meditating in high school. I went to school. I was very, very dyslexic, so my parents sent me to a school that was helpful. And my school had the premise that by the time you're 16, your brain's learned to rework itself, and you've probably overcome it, but that your brain, your belief about yourself is blocking you. So they taught us all to meditate and made us do it every day. And now looking back on that, and having been a regular meditator, I find that it's really been one of those things that's helped me through some really challenging times in my life. And as I sit down and I listen to people's stories here at Butterfield, a lot of times there's a lot of challenges at this age and stage in life. And meditation can really help. And meditation helps on a few different levels. Meditation has been found to change the structure of your brain. They've been doing scans, and I'm going to go through those. But it changes the actual structure of your brain. It improves the happiness part of your brain and your hippocampus for memory. They also have found on scans that as we age, our brain shrinks. The cortical matter, the gray matter, shrinks. Meditators' brains are not shrinking. They're finding so many positive things to a meditator. And when I think of the studies, my mind goes directly to the nun study and to the nuns with the plaques and tangles in their brains who are not exhibiting the symptoms of Alzheimer's. They only found out they had it on an autopsy. They probably would have been shocked to hear it because they were not exhibiting any of the symptoms. I think meditation is becoming more important now in our society. We are a go, 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 go. Even think here at Butterfield. If you're not telling me I had to choose between this and that, then Ricky and I are like, oh, we're not doing our job. There's all of these things to be doing in this go, 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 go. But I don't think that that's what our brains need all the time. I think we need that time to downshift. And the research is matching that you need that time to downshift. But so many people say, well, I don't know about meditation. And if you've taken my meditation talk, you've done this before. But if you haven't, I'm going to get us quickly on the same page as to what meditation is. So I want you just to sit comfortably and close your eyes. I'm going to take us through a breathing technique just so that I can do my meditation thing, just because I want you to switch gears. So from right here, just relax. We're going to inhale for the count of 4, hold your breath for the count of 7, exhale for the count of 8. I want you to inhale for 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, inhale 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, inhale 4, 3, 2, 1, hold 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, exhale 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now stay here, stay relaxed, keep your eyes closed. I want you to imagine that you have a lemon in your hand. It's cut in half. Look at it. And now put that lemon in your mouth and taste it. Really taste it. Really think about that lemon. Now notice your mouth. If you have more saliva, you have just meditated. And open your eyes. That is as simple as meditation is. It is taking and finding a way to break that constant stream of thought. And there's so many ways to do it. It's just taking a mental break. You can do it with prayer. You can do it with so many different ways. And then being consistent to do it every day. But it takes as little, from the research, as 8 weeks to change your brain and meditate. And what I find is that I feel so much more rejuvenated after I've spent a little bit of time doing it. what they found is that it really, really changes your brain, makes you more able to handle the stressors of life, more resilient, happier. And so I'm adding a meditation class. It will not be starting tomorrow. It will be starting Tuesday. That class is at 4 o'clock. It will either be in this room right here or in the lodge gym. I've got to get permission because someone just asked if we could switch it where we don't have to walk to the lodge. I'm just looking for a quiet place. And in that meditation class, we're just going to be trying different forms of meditation with the idea you just have to find one that you really like, that you want to stick with.